One of our favorite charts here on All In is this one. I can't get enough of it. It shows just how much Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas has benefited from outside gifts. The bar, wait, can I see where Thomas? Oh, there he is, right, yeah. The bar all the way on the left, that's it. That's Clarence Thomas. All the other Supreme Court justices are just all those little nubs. Clarence Thomas has received an estimated $4 million in gifts, much of which, as you see between those two colors, right, undisclosed and disclosed, almost half of which, maybe 40% of which, was never disclosed. And that's all that we know so far, by the way. There may be more undisclosed. Now, two Democratic senators who've been probing Thomas's gifts are asking Attorney General Merrick Garland to appoint a special counsel to investigate him, writing, "We do not make this request lightly. The evidence assembled thus far plainly suggests that Justice Thomas has committed numerous willful violations of federal ethics and false statement laws, and raises significant questions about whether he and his wealthy benefactors have complied with their federal tax obligations. Presented with opportunities to resolve questions about his conduct, Justice Thomas has maintained a suspicious silence." One of those senators is Sheldon Whitehouse of Rhode Island. He's chairman of the Senate Judiciary Subcommittee on Federal Courts, and he joins me now. Senator, what got you to this point? You have been obviously concerned with the obvious and apparent ethical lapses of this justice for a while. What brought you to this moment?
Really getting frustrated with the absence of any proper fact-finding at the Supreme Court and the refusal of Thomas through his lawyers to answer what I consider to be really basic questions, particularly with respect to the $250,000 loan for his motor coach, which it appears no principal was ever repaid on. And so the question is, what took place? And all his lawyers would say is that the terms of the agreement were satisfied in full, which is, you will recognize, are what lawyers would call weasel words that don't actually give you the facts. So having run up against that wall, we've now asked people with real investigative authority, the Attorney General, to look into criminal violations of the disclosure laws, false statement potential felonies, and tax violations potentially by Justice Thomas or by his donors and lenders.
You know, I want to just stay with that third thing for a second. In the case of the RV, this is the sort of land yacht RV that it's $250,000. He was loaned the money for it to purchase it by a wealthy benefactor who then subsequently, if I understand this correctly, forgave the entire loan with none of it being paid back. So essentially a gift. And again, I'm not a tax lawyer, but, you know, I got to do my taxes like everyone else. If someone gives you a $250,000 gift, like, I'm pretty sure you have to report that, right? Am I crazy?
There is a very clear and specific provision in the tax law and in the disclosure law that says that forgiveness of a debt is income and must be declared as such. And this was a debt. He borrowed $250,000 thereabouts, $267,300 to be exact, and he paid interest on it for a while. Then the interest payments stopped, and our information is that no principal was ever repaid, which means that in some fashion that debt was either forgiven or somebody else stepped in and paid. And when there were no reasonable answers coming back from Justice Thomas, we just had to assume the worst. And so we've turned it over for proper investigation. But undoubtedly, the forgiveness of a loan, very simple language, anyone could understand it, is income for tax and disclosure purposes.
Yeah, I mean, I think that just seems clear as a bell. In terms of this letter to Merrick Garland, I mean, I think he's going to blow you off, if I had to guess about Merrick Garland. So I guess the question is, where does this go? And one of the thoughts I had, and I don't think this is the right way to go, but I just want to lay out that the holding of the majority in Trump v. U.S., as written by John Roberts, is that Joe Biden could instruct the Justice Department to open a tax investigation of Clarence Thomas tomorrow, and that would be fully within its constitutional power. Is that how you understand the holding of that as well? Yeah,
I think, frankly, it would be, even if he did it for a criminal purpose, even if he did it as a result of a bribe,
yes.
Even if he did it in order to commit some act of treason, it really didn't matter that he would be protected in doing that.
I want to call your attention because I thought, it's hard to think about, well, how does this normally work? And I thought there was an interesting story out of Alaska in which a federal district judge in Alaska was accused of sexual harassment. There was a fact-finding undertaken by a panel of judges. There was a report issued. And ultimately, this judge, Josh Kindred, was asked to leave his post, and he resigned. Again, reports of impropriety, a fact-finding undertaken, a report issued, and a recommendation. And what was striking to me to read this was just, oh, right, it isn't anything goes for the rest of the federal judiciary. You can't just take a $250,000 loan forgiven. You can't sexually harass your clerks. There is some mechanism of accountability for everyone else.
Your key words there were fact-finding undertaken. That's what the Supreme Court won't permit for itself. They're the only 9 people in all of government for whom that is true. If you go to state Supreme Courts, they are overseen by panels of lower court judges when there's a legitimate ethics complaint and there is a fact-finding procedure. Federal district judges, federal circuit court judges, they all have fact-finding. Fact-finding is kind of the essence of process of law. It's almost so basic in essence that you don't even think about it. So when these judges won't answer questions about what they knew about their wife's role in insurrection activities, or when they make false statements about what was the justification for flying MAGA battle flags, there's no accountability to the truth. And of all the people to be not accountable to the truth, Supreme Court justices would seem to be the worst of all. Yeah.
I will just say that when we have this table of likely undisclosed gifts, just a final point on the fact checking is just that this is the stuff we know about from reporting and other stuff. But again, it's not comprehensive. We don't know what we don't know. And it would be nice to have an actual comprehensive accounting of what exactly is going on. Senator Sheldon Whitehouse is seeking that. Thank you very much for your time tonight, Senator.
Thank you very much.
Just about everywhere you look right now, climate change staring us in the face, melting our faces, in fact. Hurricane Beryl, that is the earliest Category 5 and Category 4 Atlantic hurricane on record ever in recorded history, ripped through the Caribbean last week before flooding Houston and knocking out power to millions of Texans. Right now, 160 million people, nearly half the country, are currently under some kind of heat alert. Las Vegas hit 120 degrees, Phoenix hit 118, Portland, Oregon, 102. Just to be clear, all 3 of those are all-time records for each of those cities. It's hot enough to melt crayons just by leaving them in the Vegas sun. It's not going to break until later this week. Now, for decades, as you know, conservatives and Republicans have lied about climate change. There's no other way to put it. They've said it's not happening, or that it is happening, but it's natural, or that actually, no, the world is cooling. All kinds of nonsense. Here's the thing. Things have finally gotten to the point in the last few years, particularly the last year or two, where they've just run out of room for those lies. You just can't do it. The Republicans cannot tell you the world is not getting hotter because it very obviously is. And so now they're just trying to yada, yada, yada their way out of it. That is why Donald Trump had no answer when asked about climate change at the debate.
Former President Trump, you've vowed to end your opponent's climate initiatives, but will you take any action as president to slow the climate crisis?
Well, let me just go back to what he said about the police, how close the police are to him. Almost every police group in the nation from every state is supporting Donald J. Trump. Almost every police group.
38 seconds left. President Trump, will you take any action as president to slow the climate crisis?
So I want absolutely immaculate clean water, and I want absolutely clean air, and we had it. We had H2O. We had the best numbers ever, and we did.
We had H2O. That's his response. So that's why the word climate isn't even mentioned once in the Republican 2024 party platform. They have no plan to combat climate change. Well, that's not true. They are going to actively try to stop and sabotage the incredible progress being made right now in green energy sources, thanks largely to the Biden administration. Look at this map from the Energy Information Administration. All those yellow spots are utility-scale solar units. The green ones are wind, all coming online by next spring, in the next year. New data shows that back in March, wind power generation, the black line here, overtook coal for the very first time in history. With solar, that blue line, not very far behind. But the proposed Republican Party platform says nothing about promoting green energy, just they want to drill, baby, drill. And in Project 2025, the big blueprint for actually governing, the priority is to oppose eyesore windmills built at taxpayer expense, support repeal of massive spending bills like the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs and Inflation Reduction Act that they acknowledge are providing hundreds of billions of dollars in subsidies to renewable energy developers. But it gets worse. Not only do they want to actively destroy this incredible growing industry, employing millions of Americans that could pull off the greatest energy transition since the Industrial Revolution, not only do they have no plan to mitigate the effects of climate change we see all around us, they want to actively make it worse by undoing all climate regulations. Or as Project 2025 puts it, the Biden administration's climate fanaticism will need a whole of government unwinding. There are a few areas where it's just so starkly clear what the choices are in November, and climate is one of them as we watch the world cook. As we head towards the election in November, I think those of us who understand the threat of a second Trump administration remain clear-eyed about where things currently stand as of today. In my professional lifetime, there has never been a Democratic presidential candidate polling as poorly at this point in a presidential election as Joe Biden is right now. So that's the first point to think of. Right now, Donald Trump is up more than 3 points in the national polling average. On this day 4 years ago, Biden was up 9 points in the average. On July 9th, 2016, Hillary Clinton was up almost 5. In 2012, Obama was up by 2.5 versus Mitt Romney. In 2008, he was up more than 5 against John McCain. In 2004, John Kerry narrowly led incumbent George W. Bush by 2 points. So that's on the one hand. You look at that and you say, not great. On the other hand, you do remember the presidencies of John Kerry and Hillary Clinton, right? A lot can happen between July and November. And that's not to say that the polls are wrong or to dismiss them. I think that there's been a little bit of that, and it's a little dangerous. They're not perfect. They could be systematically off. I don't think the polls are wrong. I think at this moment in time, all the data that we have, and again, we don't know, but the data we have says Joe Biden is losing this race right now, at this moment in time. If the election was held today, what we have suggests Donald Trump would win, would likely be the next president. But, and also, can't stress this enough, no one knows the future. The future is still unwritten. Just ask President John Kerry. So I don't think it is worth sinking into some kind of despair on July 9th, more than 100 days out from the election. To that point, I think it's worth looking at Sunday's runoff elections in France. Now, you might recall, if you read the international coverage of this, and indeed the French coverage of this, in the days leading up to that election, it was kind of an absolute given that the ascendant far right would sweep out the left and the center. Right-wing parties had just made massive gains in the EU parliamentary elections shortly before this vote was called. And in the first round of voting in France, they have a 2-round system. Marine Le Pen's hard right, neo-fascist National Rally Party, they had to change the name because the old one was so toxic, won a pretty decisive victory, the best they've ever performed, that party. And so there was a second round of elections, a runoff. And ahead of that runoff, it again looked as though the National Rally would win again. They would romp. There was this media narrative that the far right was invincible, that the center and the left were helpless to stop its march. But then a few things happened. First, a popular front formed in France. And I mean that literally. It was a political coalition of the center left and the far left and the center calling itself the New Popular Front. And that wasn't an accident. It is because France still has a visceral memory of fascism from the last century, from the Nazi occupation and the Vichy government there. So to see a party like the National Rally, whose roots date back to the worst and most dishonorable moments in French history, poised to take over the French Republic activated something in the French civic consciousness. And the anti-fascist majority took tangible steps to block the national rally. Now, unlike the U.S., France is a multi-party system, and candidates there made pragmatic, strategic choices to not split the unified vote against the far right. So what this meant is that in three-way races between the right, the center, and the left, hundreds of, in this case, mostly centrist candidates who were polling in third place dropped out so as to consolidate support against the national rally. I love this quote. One candidate who is from President Emmanuel Macron's centrist Renaissance party saying something to the effect of, defeats happen, but you can never recover from dishonor. The people in these coalitions, in the Macron bloc, which is centrist, and the left bloc, don't necessarily agree with each other on policy, but they came together to say they will not pass. We cannot allow this monstrously cruel, dangerous far-right party with roots in the worst moments of our French history to take power. And guess what? It worked. Amid massive voter turnout, the left and the center formed a winning coalition. In fact, the national rally came in a shocking third, which is how you get split screens like this of French leftists on the left celebrating their win, while right-wingers watch the results in stunned, sometimes teary disappointment. I've watched a lot of these videos, and I could watch them all day long. There really is a lesson here. Yes, to be clear, a very different situation from the one we were in for a bunch of reasons. Nature of French politics, multi-party democracy, runoffs. We got a two-party system. There's not going to be a runoff election or a coalition government. But the thing to understand is there still is a basic coalitional element at play in this country, which is this. There is an extant anti-Trump majority here in these United States. It has shown up time and time again. The question is, how can we best unite that anti-Trump majority, that pro-democracy majority, coalition, like we did in 2018 and in 2020 and in 2022? Obviously, part of that has to be uniting around the candidate who will be up against Donald Trump, the Democratic Party candidate. But that's just the beginning in some ways. Part of the lesson from France, where a lot of people who voted didn't necessarily love the person at the top of the coalition, right, is that what they were uniting around there and what we should be uniting around here is a deeper defense of our dearest civic values, liberty and democracy, in the face of our own right-wing authoritarian monster. America has a different history and legacy with fascism. I will say a big chunk of the country did go a bit wobbly on it at times, particularly in the late 1930s. But basically, from World War II onwards, our role in opposing tyranny, right, World War II and after, that has been a core civic value of this country as well. And I do believe there's a chance that our own Popular Front could once again reemerge, that it wants to in the next 100 days, 4 months. And that's not to ignore the very precarious situation we're currently in. And believe me, I'm telling you this straight as I read it. I don't think the polls are all wrong. But we have no idea what the future will bring. None. And as France just showed the world, there is still time, lots of time, to do the hard, necessary work to beat back the right-wing authoritarians once again.
Hey there, MSNBC fans. I'm Luke Russert, and be sure to join me, Rachel Maddow, Jen Psaki, Lawrence O'Donnell, Steve Kornacki, Joy Reid, and many more September 7th in Brooklyn, MSNBC Live Democracy 2024. Click on the link for ticket information. We will see you there.